Hi, this is Lamar, and you're listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. A third space is a term that refers to a safe space for people to come together for respectful dialogue in a spirit of listening, sharing, and learning. In this podcast, we explore what it means to have third space conversations, and we try to model them. Getting to Third Space is produced by Tenacious Change, a consultancy committed to creating resilient, nonprofit organizations. If you like what you hear in this podcast, please be sure to subscribe, share it, and of course, like it. The more people join us, the quicker we get to third space as a society. Now let's get to third space today.
Hey, good afternoon, Lamar. How's it going?
Hey, Tom, I'm doing well. And you?
Pretty well indeed. What's it like there in Kansas today? We'll do a weather report.
Weather report from central Kansas is sunny with a slight breeze. There's a slight breeze in Kansas is usually close to 20 miles an hour, just so you know.
I remember.
Yeah.
So I think I'm overdressed for the day. I'm wearing a sweatshirt and it's going up to 75 degrees here. And,
okay.
And I'm thinking that was not a really good fashion choice for myself today, but it is what it is, and so I'll just suffer through. If you see beads of sweat coming down, it's just because of the sweatshirt. So
this is the time of the year that I lose clothing at places because I end up dressing in layers. And then by the time I'm ready to come home, I don't need the layers, and so I, leave stuff places.
Yeah.
So
hey,
I'm getting old. Yeah.
Hey, you have something out there that we don't have. You have grass.
We do it
in the yard.
We do, and I actually did my first mowing today.
Whoa!
And now I've been running my lawn. I use my lawnmower for a lot of different things, but I do mow with it once in a while. But I have a secret about mowing for those who don't care to mow. First of all, get a riding mower, and that's the first thing you do. Second thing is you build decks. Build a bunch of decks. The more decks you build, the less grass you have to mow. So that's kind of what I've been up to the last year or so. I've got multiple decks. I have one more to stain yet, and then I'm done.
Well, I'm guessing too. It also gives you a sense of you like driving in a road race because you have to go in and around the decks, right?
It is, and it's a zero turn lawnmower. Of course, I used to work for a company that made them, so I had to have one, and so, but of course, I had to get one that was bigger than I really needed. And so when I built everything, I had to make sure I could get the thing through everything I built.
Yes.
But
yes,
no, I hook up to my trailer. I have an 8-foot trailer that I also, pull brush and whatever. I take it to the landfill or to the burn pile, and I pull it around with my lawnmower because I don't want to take my cars in the backyard. So,
well, that's
it's
nice
a multi-purpose machine.
Yeah. Well, excellent. That's really good. It sounds like fun. It's been a long time since I've been on a riding mower, so I don't know if I would trust myself on one anymore. But they can be a lot of fun. They really can. Do you have to measure between the decks, according to the size of your mower to make sure you can get it through? Or
no, the key is you build all the decks together, so it's one big deck around the house.
Perfect.
So, kind of like the wraparound porches of the yesteryear, right?
And then once you get that deck built, then you build a deck for that deck, right?
You got to step down onto a deck for the rest of the year. Yeah. So you see where I'm going with my plan.
Yeah. That's a pretty good plan. Speaking of plans, we are introducing something kind of different today.
Right.
And you're going to tell folks about that in just a minute. But let me remind folks that even though we're doing something a little bit different, this is all still about getting to third space. And when we talk about a third space, we're talking about that space where people can come together for civil, respectful, honest dialogues with one another, even on some of the most difficult subjects. Dialogues that don't have to end in fights, dialogues that don't have to end in silence, in which people aren't speaking to each other for the next, 12, 13, 14 millennium. But that space where people, even when they disagree a lot with one another, can still come together and have that kind of civil conversation that allows them to better understand where each other is coming from and brings the temperature down in terms of
Mhm.
the debate and the dialogue they might otherwise have. So those are the ideas behind the third space, and those don't change. This is still getting to third space with Lamar and Tom, but we're going to introduce a cool new feature.
That's right.
So Lamar, tell them about that.
Well, we have been talking about this on and off, actually from the beginning. Just at various times, we kind of brought this idea up. Um, part of what people may assume is that you and I agree on a lot of things, um, and that's true,
Mm-hmm.
but not everything, for sure. Um, and we've had guests on the show, we've had good conversations, but we felt that it's also important to be able to model what we're talking about. But it's hard to do that unless we have a good topic that we're kind of chewing on and taking a look at. And so we actually sat down and we just wrote a list of topics, and we searched the internet and come up with hot topics in America. And as you could probably guess what a lot of those are. But we have this list that we're looking at. And what would it be like if you and I sat down in our podcast and took an opportunity to process one of these hot topics?
Right.
So we're calling this Table Talk. And we
Right.
won't do it every session, every podcast, but we will do it on occasion, and may even in the future, depending on how this develops, bring guests into a table talk. And so today we've picked a topic, and we picked a topic that probably isn't as hot, maybe, as some of the other topics as far as polarization, but it certainly is. It connects with the artificial intelligence conversations that we've had for a couple of sessions on podcast. That it certainly is one that is very up front and center in our culture today. And that topic is self-driving vehicles.
Right.
And you know my coffee group.
Do they
This
have
has been
opinions about this? Do they?
this has been a topic of conversation as well, as self-driving vehicles in the area, on the highway, on the roads, in the cities, in the farms, in the air. I mean, so we have a lot of possibilities here that I think be interesting to have this dialogue and see if we can exercise some of the very techniques that you and I have been talking about.
Right. And when we were planning this, we simplified it as well. We decided that the way to really approach this is to really to come up with a core question in relationship to the topic. So, for example, if we were just going to say we're going to talk about self-driving cars today, that's a huge, broad area.
Right.
But what we did is we refined that down to a question that might be a lot like a question that people would talk about at a kitchen table or having coffee, in Lamar's restaurant or something like that. And the question in this case is, do we really need self-driving vehicles? And so that's kind of our starting point here today.
Okay.
I think that's kind of fun, huh?
I think it's a fun topic, and
Yeah.
People have probably realized that technologically, you and I have some challenges sometimes, even though I think
one of us does. One of us does.
I th-
they should see us trying to get set up for this. Between lights and microphones, it's like a zoo.
I think I've said this before. I always thought that I was pretty much, kind of in the front edge of technology until recently. The last 5 years, maybe it's like I feel like I have really slipped behind technology. Yeah. But self-driving vehicles, do we need them? The tremendous amount of technology in place, and I don't know what you have done since we've last talked about trying to get information on self-driving vehicles, but I've been fascinated by this conversation potential, and so I've done a little looking and a little pondering.
So what do you think? Do we need them?
I'm going to say, yeah, I think we need them, and I think it's a good thing, and I think that I think we need to think beyond just self-driving cars. I think we need to think about self-driving vehicles in the sense of cargo, moving cargo across the country, airplanes, trains, all the kinds of things that semis, all those things that are important to the kind of lifestyle we have developed. Safety, but that's a big question. Is it safe or is it not safe? A cost, and what are the downsides? I mean, so yeah, I've been thinking about this, but I'm
So,
coming out, I think, on the side of, yeah, I think we need it. I think we need to move towards this.
oh, really? Okay, that's
Did
interesting.
that surprise you?
Not really,
Okay.
because I tend to be a curmudgeon, and so and so my thinking is not yet. We don't need them yet. We're not there yet. Um, I understand. There's some real benefit. You mentioned some real benefits to them, uh, but I think that they're still in the developmental phase, and I'm not sure how ethical it is for them to continue to experiment with them in mixed traffic environments. And this was one of the concerns that I saw raised is that when you are having a vehicle go out, and an autonomous vehicle or self-driving vehicle go out in a mixed traffic environment where there's human drivers, the potential for problems is even greater because it's set up to respond according to certain pre pre-considered conditions. Uh, but but whenever you have human beings involved in a traffic situation, you have what is known as a complex adaptive system,
Mm-hmm.
and the nature of that system is such that it is highly unpredictable. And so the autonomous vehicle really depends upon the ability to predict the environment, and unless it can be adaptive in the moment, it's going to have a really hard time doing that. Or alternatively, if everybody else on the road is in the same kind of vehicle. So my feeling is I'm not saying it's a bad idea because I think there's some real pluses. I think that, especially, for example, as I get older, as my spouse gets older, and if we
Right.
reach that point where we're not able to drive at some point, having a self-driving vehicle could be very, very handy for getting to doctor's appointments, or to the racetrack, or to the bingo parlor or something like that, right? but 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 I'm going to have to say no, not yet. I'm not there yet.
So I think, so what I'm hearing is about, um, security and safety is a
Yeah.
primary concern, and
Yeah.
I don't think we're that far off, to be honest with you, on that point. And I think maybe
Okay.
some of it is about how do we define self-driving vehicles. I think there's a difference between self-driving vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and driverless vehicles. Okay.
Oh, that's interesting. So say more about that. How do you differentiate between those three?
Okay. So Tesla, for example, has a self-driving feature. It's called full self-driving (FSD),
Yeah.
and so, um, you can set it for FSD, but they're requiring and they're recommending that you have a person at the wheel,
Okay.
to be able to use that feature.
Right.
And it's a feature you turn on and can be turned off. So it's not like it's the only way that car runs.
Right.
There's a company that runs semis that are self-driving semis,
Okay.
meaning that, uh, it it follows a path. It has all of the equipment to, that keeps it in lanes, making turns, using signals, braking for emergencies, all those kinds of things. But it has a safety driver. So the safety driver oversees that process and is still riding along behind the wheel and can override.
Hmm.
Um, there's a couple of companies. that have cargo planes. One of the best cargo planes out there. And I used to fly airplanes. I don't fly
Mm-hmm.
anymore, but I used to fly airplanes. And one of my favorite airplanes to think about flying, I never did, was a Cessna 208, which is a cargo plane, a Caravan, and it's used. UPS uses it, FedEx uses it, lots of companies use it to carry cargo. And a company has taken these planes and has enhanced the already well developed autopilot system. Almost all makers of airplanes have autopilot systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can land and they can take off with them, even in some of the more complex ones. But the difference in what they're developing is a plane that actually can take off, can be monitored in a studio or a hangar somewhere by someone at a station. Hit the waypoints. Waypoint meaning a fixed place in space that an airplane
Mm-hmm.
goes to make a turn, etc. Be able to land at the appropriate airport and be able to unload cargo and take off and return. And even though it's years away from like an FAA approving something like that, the concept I think is a great concept. But for now, they have safety pilots to sit in the seat. So I think that there's ways to use those things that's not driverless. On the flip side, in San Francisco, where else? There's Phoenix, Austin, some other places have autonomous cabs, no driver.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
They've had a few problems.
Yeah. Yes, they have.
but so there is some of that happening. But right now, some of those concerns on safety, I think they're well aware of those. I think that, you know, I think you have to test it out on the road with real situations to see if it really works.
Well, I did a little bit of research. I I asked our friend Perplexity AI. Uh, hey, actually, they should sponsor us if we keep mentioning
Let's
their
reach
name,
out to
right?
them.
Yeah. I asked Perplexity this question. I said, "How many accidents have involved self-driving vehicles in the U.S.?" And of course, self-driving vehicles haven't been around that long, but
Right.
from July 2021 to May 2022, there were 392 reported crashes involving vehicles. Um, of those 392, 273 involved Tesla vehicles,
Yeah.
which in my mind is just another good reason not to give an owner of that company more money or power. So,
Can I interrupt you for just a second, Tom?
yes.
Have you seen the video of the lady who's asleep behind the wheel, headed down the interstate in a Tesla, and everyone's trying to get her attention?
No, I haven't seen that commercial. Oh,
It's
my goodness.
it's
But I
like,
know,
this is the ultimate scary thing.
yeah. Well, then from May 2022 to September 2022, there were 11 more fatalities from crashes involving vehicles with automated technology, and 10 of those involved the Tesla.
Hmm.
So Tesla's got not a good track record on this, despite the
Yeah.
fact that, they're one of the most common cars you see out there operating. But I was going to say though, what you're talking about in terms of the the driverless, the self-driving, and the autonomous. The one thing that they all seem to have in common at this point is that there's still a human there in the plane, in the truck, and in the that can do an override if necessary. So, except maybe in the case of the taxis
Right.
in San Francisco, but in other cases, there's a human that's there. Now, in one sense, that's not very different from the car that I have. I drive a Subaru Outback, or not Outback, excuse me, Crosstrek,
Okay.
that has all of the safety features. That was important to me. When I got this car, that it had all the bells and whistles to make sure that I didn't, if I wanted to go fancy, I would go with a Cadillac, right, or something like that, uh, um, or a, or a Porsche. Like I could afford a Porsche.
I wasn't going to
but,
say that.
but the Subaru is known for safety. and
Yeah.
it's also known for recycling their vehicles. But it has this really terrific safety package on it, and and I can actually sit in that car on I-95 and never touch the wheel when I have the various things on, because it will read where the edge of the road is. It will keep it
Hmm.
between the lines. It will automatically brake when it gets too close to the car ahead of it, and accelerate. When that distance goes further, so that it goes with the flow of the traffic. Um, it's it's pretty darn close to self-driving. The thing that is there is me making sure that it's I'm watching it all the time, and then also many times there is my spouse there watching me saying, don't take your hands off the wheel, right? and by
Right.
and by the way, if I do take my hands off the wheel in the Subaru, there's a there's a warning light that comes
Yeah.
on and starts screaming to put my hands back on the wheel.
Right.
So, but that's certainly a step towards that kind of technology, and I'm pretty comfortable with that, because I
Okay.
know I'm there and I'm not going to let it get too far afield by any means before I'm intervening on it. Um, I do worry about people like the in the commercial that you mentioned that are asleep at the wheel running down the highway
Yeah.
in their Tesla.
Yeah.
Because we can think back to do you remember when Winnebagos came out, and or their Winnebagos were out, and then they started adding cruise control to them, and people
Oh.
didn't understand cruise control, and there's these accidents that happened because people set their Winnebago on cruise control and then went back to the dining area and had lunch. It's like, let's use your head here.
So
And my worry is that people won't use their head even when the mechanisms are there, and so I I would really rather prefer to have people very, very attentive, behind the wheel of a car, with cars that have as much safety devices in them as guys driving, and men and women driving in NASCAR and Formula One
yeah.
do, that
Yeah.
survive those accidents. So
I think uh, that this whole concept of safety is broader than a autonomous vehicle or a driverless car, self-driving car, getting into an accident or stalling in traffic and causing a traffic jam. I think
mhm.
it's broader than that, because certainly all of those same things happen with drivers.
Yes, they do.
And I don't I did not see any data that had any comparative data. There's not enough data yet, I'm sure, to even compare.
Yeah.
But the things that bother me or worry me, I think I worry less about your car driving down the highway and staying centered in the lane than I do about the inattentive driver who's doing a text or a FaceTime call on their phone while they're driving and moving into my lane or cutting me off, which has happened, and tragic things have happened with inattentive driving. With as we know, I don't even have to go down that list, but physical ailments,
Hmm.
intoxication, inebriation, all those kinds of things that impact driving that we people just take driving for granted. I, I'm seeing a real upside in having vehicles that uh, that have the potential of taking those errors out of the experience.
Yeah. Now, last Sunday, we were out for a little bit, and we were driving on I-95, and I-95 speeds along. The speed limit on it is 65 miles an hour, which means that the effective speed limit is 75 to 80, and that's
Right.
and that's and that's pretty much the how fast the traffic flows. So we're coming down from near Columbia on I-95 towards our home in Laurel, and there were two cars that were built by folks that love to race them, right? The night
Hmm.
racers, the road racers. They were racing each other on I-95, and I have never seen anything quite like this. I mean, I've seen a lot of racers, they'll go by it at 120, 140 miles an hour, and boom, they're gone. But they were actually treating the traffic like a slalom course. And I was going right at 75 to 80. They must have been doing 100 to 120.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see them doing this zigzagging back and forth between cars, chasing each other for probably a half mile or so ahead. And I'm thinking, how does a self-driving or autonomous car deal with that? Because that's highly unusual. That's, how do you anticipate that? I turned to Clemency and I said, when you see these guys coming, the last thing you want to do is speed up or slow down, because they're calculating and they're counting on you to keep a steady speed. And if you vary that, or if you change lanes to get out of their way, you could end up causing a horrible crash.
Right. So I think that's a really important point to consider. How would an AI programmed vehicle manage unusual situations?
Yeah.
You and I, we handle them because of our experience.
Right.
Okay. We haven't had a lot of experience. I haven't had a lot of experience like you talked about, but I've had some. And part of that means that and particularly when I'm pulling campers and trailers and stuff, I'm always watching to see, okay, what's going on behind me. I now have a camera on the back of my camper. I can see what's my blind spots back there. And so, because of our experience, history, we have programmed ourselves, I think, to be aware of those kinds of things that could be happening and be prepared for them.
Yeah.
I think that I would agree that that's one of the challenges of AI in self-driving vehicles or autonomous vehicles. But there is a learning curve and a data enhancement curve that programmers can add into. And I'm sure from what I was watching, I know that they're doing ride-alongs on these vehicles to see what kind of situations happens that they have not anticipated, and programming those kinds of responses in. For example, in San Francisco, I think what had happened back in 23 or earlier, maybe there was a couple of accidents with emergency vehicles, fire trucks especially, I think it was. And the typical programmed response for those vehicles was not didn't work well, and they actually had accidents. So I know that the company's working with the San Francisco Fire Department and emergency services to build programming into their vehicles to be able to manage those situations. But also on top of that, it takes training. You can't just just like that Tesla driver I talked about. You just can't give someone a vehicle and a tool to punch a button and sit back and take a snooze. I would think that there's a really important part of training that goes into all of this. So they're also training the fire department, the emergency responders on how to work with self-driving vehicles should there be some sort of an incident or some sort of a connection. So I think that this whole safety thing, which is important, expands across a lot of maybe areas that we should be working on anyway. Mm-hmm. And I've often thought that so many things that are dangerous, that have risks to them, we have allowed people to just step into and do it themselves, not realizing the risk that it has for other people. But when like I said, I used to fly airplanes, and to get my pilot's license to be able to fly that airplane by myself, it took an incredible amount of investment of my time and resources to do that. I'm wondering if maybe that's something we ought to reconsider as we kind of move into this age of having these kinds of vehicles and tools available to us to make our lives easier, more economical, more efficient. There's a price to pay for that, maybe.
Yeah. Well, Lamar, we probably are at a point where we need to be winding this down, but just to
Yeah.
kind of show where we are. So, generally speaking, I'm thumbs down on
Yeah.
the self-driving, and that's not a forever. It's not like I wouldn't want something like that at some time in the future, but right now I'm not a big fan
Okay.
and of them. And you seem to be more
I'm a thumbs up on it.
okay.
I think that it's a good thing. It's I think that the way that the responsibility there's been some irresponsible development of this. I would agree, and testing it, but I think that's coming into check. I
Mm-hmm.
think I like the idea of safety drivers, of developing the software and the product. I think it's going to be a plus. It may not be here tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
but it may be here sooner than we think in some areas. And some
Very
a
well
plus.
might be.
I do want to say, I think you made some really good points, and I don't think we disagree on those main points. I think maybe it's more application of how we can apply them today.
Yeah.
Should we wait or should we go for it?
Yeah. And I think what was really useful to me in terms of your position in this is really kind of explaining the difference as you see it between the autonomous vehicles, the self-driving vehicles, and the driverless. I think those
Yeah,
were the three categories, right?
right.
And that was really useful. I appreciate that. Well, so what do you think?
Well, I hope that this was an example of talking through something that we didn't agree on necessarily, but we had some points that we both made sense of. I like the fact that we could affirm, the things that did make sense.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think there's any personal attacks in there, not too much anyway. You know, I do want to take a ride in your car when I come out and visit sometime and go down
What
down
doesn't your
95.
car
Yeah.
have that?
My car doesn't have it quite to that. It'll bounce me back from the edge of the road,
I
and then
see.
after it bounces me 2 or 3 times, it gives me that funny warning that you're talking about. Yeah, all the
Yeah.
lights go off and blink. Then it just shuts it off and saying, "No, you're driving. You can't use this feature anymore."
Yeah. I
So
tell you what we will leave our spouses behind and you and
okay,
I will go out on I-95 and I'll show you what I'm talking about.
all right,
And
all right.
otherwise they're going to freak out. Well, at least my wife won't speak to me for a week if
You know my
no,
wife.
she's very, very, our
Yeah.
wives are extremely tolerant because, hey, they're married to us. And,
Oh, okay. Well, no, this has been interesting, and I think that we're from time to time we're going to do a table talk. We obviously have some topics in the future that may be a little bit more controversial, a little bit more hot button types of topics,
right.
um, and our goal, whether it hits a political side, a religious type of thing, or some sort of maybe even moral issue for some people, our goal is not to stir up thoughts about that topic, but to show ways to talk about them and interact with them that's civil.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's our
And it's
goal.
not, and we certainly can't settle any of those issues.
No,
No matter how much we might want to, we can't settle those issues. But what we can do is we can find a way to talk about them. And that's what we hope, people will take away is some ideas for how do you have that conversation. So, yeah.
right,
Oh, this was fun. And this was intentionally a fun topic, right? I mean, we said, oh,
right.
yeah, let's talk about self-driving cars. That's going to be a great way to introduce this segment. But we've got some more interesting, or not necessarily more interesting, but some more, well, some questions with slightly sharper elbows to them,
Right.
you know.
It's a nice way to
Eh,
say that.
Yeah, sharp elbow. We're just coming out of basketball season. We can talk about sharp elbows. So, All right.
right.
Well, so we want to remind folks to please, if you find this even just a modicum entertaining or interesting or informative, please subscribe. Please share it. Please like it. All of that really matters to us. We're trying to build our audience out there, and we hope that you wouldn't mind stepping up and helping us out with that. So. And Lamar, you probably ought to tell them how to contact us just in case they want to argue with us about this point.
Sure. Well, first of all, if you happen to know us, you can always contact us that way. Grab us a coffee or send us an email or give us a call. But we do have emails to the podcast that we want to encourage you to use as well. And for Tom, it'd be Tom. I just froze Tom. Tom.thirdspace at gmail.com and Lamar.thirdspace@gmail.com. And remember that third space is spelled with a numeral 3.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I guess that's it for the day, man. I mean,
Right.
I can't think of any more damage we could possibly do. I mean,
Well, it's been good, and we look forward to our next time. So we'll catch up.
All right. See you later, Lamar.
Take care, man. Bye.
Tom here. Thank you for listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Remember to click on subscribe to get notices about new episodes, and be sure to like and share the podcast as well. Opinions and ideas expressed in this podcast are solely those of Lamar Roth and Tom Klaus. And we'd like to hear your opinions and ideas too. You can leave us a voice message on Spotify, or you can email us at the addresses found in the show notes. Also, in the show notes, you can find links to some of the things we talked about today, so you can check them out yourself. Until next time, keep moving forward toward third space.